I'm Alex.
I'm Robbie.
And this is Combat Thoughts.
We take a deeper look at culture and philosophy behind martial arts.
All right, so fighter pay is a thing that's come up a lot recently. Fighters are always kicking off about pay. Apparently, people have been kicking up a lot more over, lockdown with the UFC apparently buying an island. Not quite true, but it did. It did obviously raise the fact that a lot of UFC fighters maybe aren't entirely happy with their pay. There's the whole business lately with John Jones and Henry Cejudo keeps saying he'll come back for a high enough paycheck.
Masvidal's been very vocal as well.
I mean, I guess there's loads of points to cover, but the first bit is like, are fighters paid enough? And like, who decides if that is enough?
Yeah, it's very clear to me that they are not.
Okay.
I don't know. I've been listening to a lot of different viewpoints on this. Whether it's from the fighter's perspective, some people say it should only be the fighters talking about it, which I don't necessarily agree with. They have the only right opinion about it. I don't think that's right. But a lot of the media guys have talked about it as well. And I watched the Eugene Behrman interview as well, and he mentioned it. Talking about those percentages that you hear that the UFC kind of pays fighters like 18% of their revenue or something like that. I don't know if that.
Yeah, so that comes out of the lawsuit that's going against them with, I think it's like Kung Lee, John Fitch, and like some of the numbers have come out in court, and they pay anywhere between 12 and 18% of revenue, when most other mainstream US sports is close to 50%. So I think that's kind of been where a lot of the kind of frustrations grown from recently. But I think the biggest problem is the UFC is so big that it's kind of next man up. I don't like pay. I'm at the bottom of the card. I don't have a draw. I have no bargaining power, because for every person that makes it to the UFC, there's people layers below that are ready to jump up. So it's kind of the Robbie mentioned it earlier, the integrity stuff of you have to make a name for yourself. I think you look at Colby Covington. He was a mid-tier fighter. Nobody really cared about him. There was talk of them binning him off if he lost his next fight. And suddenly now he's become this make America great again, doing the rounds. But it's worked for him. He got paid more. He kept his contract. He kept his spot in the UFC by being a dick, but by selling tickets.
Yeah, well, I kind of wonder about that. Like, is it... Because a lot of fighters especially often say that it should be the best fighter who gets paid the most. But obviously from the promoter's perspective, not just from Dana White, but from any promotion, you're not actually paying for good fights. You're paying for eyes on. Eyes on. It doesn't matter whatever business you're running. If someone appears effective or not, they shouldn't. If I was running a business, I wouldn't pay someone whether they appear effective or not. I would pay someone on results, and the results for the UFC are eyes on.
Yeah.
So should it? Do either guys think that it should be otherwise? Should it be the best fighter getting the most pay, or should it be the biggest draw?
So I think the biggest draw always takes the biggest money. If you go back through boxing, if you go into WWE,
absolutely.
It's who cares the most about a fighter. For me, I think one of the biggest things around pay that I don't like is the gate. So fighters don't get any of the gate. And I think that'd be
exactly.
So the ticket sales
of the arenas.
So if you think they sell out the MGM brand,
in-person tickets. Okay, yeah.
If you took kind of 50% of the arena and then split it in tiered levels across the people on the card, And actually, then you got your kind of show and win money. And I think we'll probably get into show and win money because I disagree with that as well. But I think that would be a good way to kind of drive up the pay. And it's not perfect and it's not a solution, but I think it's probably doing a bit more than what you're currently getting, fighting 8 and 8. And if you don't like it, we'll just get somebody else in.
Well, part of what I think the trouble with the pay being so low, let alone the structure of it, I think it's pretty universally accepted that even in the UFC, at a very low level, you get paid like shit.
Yeah.
The issue, I think, is that if you're worrying about, putting food on the table, you're having less time to focus on the sport. I think it would actually improve the quality of events if fighters were more able to, not be worried about their next paycheck and being able to make sure they're going to have enough money for their families. I think it would improve the sport if there was just a bit of an increase in lower tier fighter pay. But again, I don't know how much it's going to cut into UFC margins.
For me, I think there's something about that. Sorry, right? A load of fighters kick off recently around the things they have to pay out. So you had Mike Perry moaning about taxes. Now, I think his problem is he needs a good accountant.
Yeah. Yeah, he needs to find one.
Yeah, I think doing it yourself on a piece of paper is probably not going to work anymore. But the other side of it, what people kick off about, is the amount they're paying out to kind of camps, training. I think there should be a level where the UFC says, when you're on contract to fight, we'll pay, I don't know, $10,000 towards your training fees and whatever, which to Conor McGregor's is nothing. But actually, if your first fight on the UFC, it's kind of a worry of how you're going to pay your coaches, how you're going to pay your gym membership. Having that taken away, I think is probably, especially for the lower tier, more utilities to them and will help them rather than kind of worrying, scrimping throughout camp, like Robbie said, being petrified of running out of cash and then getting paid and losing it all straight away. I think if the UFC kind of set some side around and said, when you sign a contract, here's $10,000, it pays for your camp, it pays for your training bills and whatever else. But I think that would go a long way for the lower tier fighters.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I
just
think,
kind of get you started.
The only, I guess it's not really an issue as such, but I don't know how it works for lower tier fighters, but a lot of the gyms will take percentages of winnings, right?
Yeah.
For training. So yeah, but in terms of those lower tier fighters, I heard Eugene Behrman compared it to like the people who bring in the bottles in the NFL earn the same money as the fighters in the UFC in the lower tier. I don't know if that's an exact statistic, but it's probably quite comparable. So when you think about it, it is quite ridiculous on the basis of what those guys have to go through and also what they're putting in on the line.
Yeah, and I think part of the trouble is that they might double the amount of money or half the amount of money, depends how you look at it, in a night. It comes all back to the uncertainty thing again. People don't know how much they're going to make. They don't know if they're going to be ready to sort of move forward and pay all their bills that they need to, because you get that stupid win bonus.
Yeah.
Which I think we're all agreed that it's moronic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it doesn't make you fight harder. It's not. I don't want to win any less or any more by having a win bonus.
Yeah.
No, and you know what? I'm not entirely against a win bonus. What I'm against is it being half of the money you make. Yeah. I wouldn't mind like a 10% win bonus.
Yeah.
Because you win, have some extra money. Like,
do you know what though?
That seems cool.
Do you know what though? The fact that it's all like your money is down to the judges.
Yeah.
It's in the judges of 3 people who most of the time don't have a fucking good grasp on the sport is a bit scary, and they could take 50% of your money. Like, how many cases have we seen in the past few years where judging has really become like we've really seen the extent of bad judging?
Yeah.
And can we really put the livelihood of fighters in the hands of 3 people? Like, I don't know if that judgment can be made. And to that point, I don't agree with win bonuses.
And I also think as well there's a side of that of everybody I know who's competed at any sort of level, have to have unwavering belief they're going to win, because otherwise you don't get in there. So psychologically, when you see a win bonus and a show bonus, you think, well, I'm going to win, I'm going to get all of it. People start spending that money before they get it. They lose, they get a bad decision, suddenly their money's halved. Actually, they're then in the shit because they've planned to have 100 instead of 50,000 at the end of a fight. I think
That's another good point.
Bad.
That's another good point.
Yeah.
Are fighters good management? Have good management of money, right? Most of them won't. So,
Well, I mean, to come back to Mike Perry, I don't think he's going to be the most fiscally intelligent gentleman. There's a few.
If he comes after you, I'm not sticking up for you. You're on your
I love
own.
him. I love him, but he's a loose cannon. He's a liability. And
What
there's
fighters
that,
are like fighters in like inherently crazy. They have to be.
No,
yeah.
that's fine. But there's other people as well. There's other factors to come back to the integrity thing. I remember, I think it was embedded for Cruz versus Garbrandt.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Cruz saw, I think he watched the video and he saw the bloody suits that Garbrandt was showing off. He's like, I can't afford those suits. Like, there's no way this guy can afford the suits. Garbrandt's flying around in like these private jets and shit, and all of it all comes from the Floyd Mayweather thing, where he pretends to have way more money than he has, and it's a weird draw. McGregor does the same thing, except the thing is, McGregor was smart enough that he apparently rented all those cars.
Yeah.
Which is like a bit of trouble, I think, where he was like jumping on the hood of a Bentley, and Bentley were like. But again, it comes back to fighters maybe not being the most fiscally intelligent people, and Garbrandt did win that, but he's going to have Garbrandt's not just going to have an unwavering belief that he's going to win. He's going to have an unwavering belief that he's going to win and continue to do so and continue to be great. And we all know that as soon as that Cruz fight happened, it didn't go so well for him after that.
Yeah.
And imagine how much money he would have made if is it 3 fights? 2 with Dillashaw and 1 versus, I can't remember who it was. He lost 3 in a row, right?
Yeah, it was
Garbrandt.
against the guy from ATT.
Right. But imagine instead of that money, he doubled his money. He'd
Yep.
be fine, he'd be laughing.
Yeah.
But he hadn't, because there's that huge uncertainty. So that even when you're at the high levels, like let alone when you're at the low levels, even when you're at the high levels, there's this huge uncertainty, and I think it's not very good for creating fighters that are going to keep coming back and keep making amazing shows.
Yeah.
But I think then it's kind of like we all agree the pay structure is bad. It doesn't work. But I think there's no incentive for the UFC to change. It works for them. They make a shed load of money. So how does change come around?
That's the issue, because they've set the precedent, and there's not really anyone to challenge them to that precedent.
See, that's the trouble. It's the fact there's 2 parts to it. I think why it's got in such a bad state is firstly lack of competition.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
I know everyone talks about one championship, but it is a bottomless pit of money. And we all I think a lot of people are wondering about how stable that thing is. And secondly, Bellator, apparently they pay their fighters really well, but there's only so well you can pay fighters and not be at UFC level. They're not making nearly the same amount of cash. It's the fact there's no competition, and when fighters sign up to the UFC, they are treated as employees, not as contractors. I think it's the fact that you can't bounce between organizations. You can't say well, you'll give me a better deal, so I'm going to go and fight there. Why would the UFC give up its money when it's got fighters it holds them there? They can't get out of contract with them, and even before that, people aren't going to go elsewhere. People might get paid terrible money at the bottom of the UFC, but if you are this mindset where you're going to become a champion, you're not going to be at the bottom forever, are you? You're going to rise to the top. There's problems even there.
Yeah, the top guys.
I think I listen. Sorry, mate.
Sorry, the top guys. I don't think you could get that money. Like getting 5 mil, like John Jones asking for 5 mil. Could you really get that in Bellator?
No, well, exactly.
Could he get that
So
one?
Well, probably, but that's a different story.
Right, you know what? I think we're all of the opinion that one is weird economically.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Not going down right one. If they're paying the fighters well, happy
Great.
days. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I think taking it away from the top of so not going to the John Jones level. I remember, I think it was a few years ago now, maybe last year, Paddy Pimblett said he was staying with Cage Warriors for longer because he could make more money with them than he would going to the UFC for his kind of first contract with the UFC.
That's crazy.
So he stayed
Yeah.
in the UK. He stayed fighting in Cage Warriors a bit longer, basically because he was making more cash. I think he said it to Ariel Helwani. So you kind of know yourself that actually you're signing up to the UFC. There's a big chance you're going to fight much tougher competition. You're carrying a greater risk of losing your money. And actually you stay with a smaller promotion where you're top of the kind of big fish in a little pond. You've got your sponsorships.
I wonder if they get paid on the gate with Cage Warriors, because Cage Warriors is at a much lower level. And it's funny you say they don't get paid on the gate because, obviously amateur level, you only get paid on gate.
Yep.
You get paid on the tickets that you do. It's weird. You are the promoter in a way.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the easiest way for small shows to promote. It's like £5 a ticket. You bring 300 people to come and watch. We'll give you a cut of that, and then actually they don't have to pay for advertising or pushing it out there. And then you'd kind of do get looked after, especially at the lower level when you do have a bigger following.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that, especially at lower level, most of the people that come and see you are probably your mates and your family.
Oh yeah.
So it's a bit more of an incentive. Like, that's who you can advertise to best, rather than putting adverts out. Like, if I was wandering down the street and I saw adverts, I probably wouldn't even be interested in going to the show if I don't know anyone there.
I probably wouldn't, because they're not cheap tickets either.
No, they're not. And so I think actually at early levels, that having paid on the gate, it's safer for the promoter because they know they're going to get those sales. And secondly, they're not going to lose any money. Because they only lose a little. Like, imagine you said, "I'm going to pay you this many £100," and you bring along five people to watch.
Yeah. You're kind of you're only budgeting £20 of your ticket when actually they're selling for 25 because you're giving 5 away. But it's a good point you may raise that, and I think it comes back to me around the integrity stuff. Is you're seeing people now at much lower level of the competition taking the approach of being loud on Twitter, Instagram, kind of calling people out, being that kind of inflationary person to get eyes on you, to build your reputation.
Yeah. I think we're seeing now with Sean O'Malley right now, even though the eyes on him have been there since the Snoop Dogg reaction shit. But then obviously it went a bit quiet after his injury and the whole Mike Picograms thing.
Yep.
Now he's building it up again, and he is talking a lot, and he's doing it on purpose. So,
but at the minute he's the golden child of the UFC, and kind of they're bringing him
he's
through
the
as
Sage
the next
Northcutt.
wave. Yeah, but I think I'm seeing, especially at lower levels, amateur MMA, people calling people out on Instagram, kind of making up false beef, kind of having a videographer with them, trying to build who they are virtually to kind of help get them to that level quicker. Yeah. And I think, is that the only way you can do it?
Well, the thing is, it is probably because, that's pretty universally accepted. That's what you get paid on. You get paid on being a draw. There's a reason that, like Justin Gaethje, for example, gets paid, I think, quite a lot compared to some of the other fighters, considering that he's not been in the UFC that long. And I know he's very high level, but he gets paid, as far as I know, he gets paid more because he is that draw.
Yep. If you sell pay-per-views, they want you, and they'll pay you for that.
I mean, Nate Diaz is a perfect example of it. The guy barely fights, and he's one of the biggest draws in the fucking UFC.
Yeah, and the thing is, even if I'm not gonna make more money out of being a draw at an amateur level, it's probably good to get the practice in.
Yeah. But I also
The
think
thing,
if you're saying like about Diaz there, I think it's quite self-serving though. So you're saying about kind of helping fighters at the lower end of the scale. John Jones has kind of said, I'm not going to fight until pay increases.
Mm.
He's not going to fight till John Jones's pay increases. He don't give a shit about anybody else. And that's where I think the fighters are very, which they should be, so quite self-centered. But I don't think the model changes until they kind of come together and work to kind of get a better system or change the system. Because currently it's, I'm going to stop fighting. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to be like Jorge Masvidal. I know I'm worth so much. Now, Burns is injured. They're just going to have to pay him. He's not going to mention pay now. He's going to get paid and shut up. That doesn't change the system. It's just people with a platform being able to moan to get a bit more cash.
Mm.
Nothing's going to change.
well, yeah, because the thing is, the UFC can put pressure on fighters because they say, well, look, the UFC holds all the cards in the sense that if 5 fighters say they're not going to fight, the UFC will say, okay, cool. You don't get close to the title shot. You don't get paid, and we can just find someone else to fill your slot. It's pretty well accepted. There's so many fighters. The only way for fighters to get some cards in their hands is it's not even unionize. They just need to work together because otherwise, because the UFC, the only danger to them is that they don't have enough people to put on cards. And
Yep.
until a lot of people come together, you get a massive action like on a large scale. There's nothing that they can do.
Because I heard something with Ben Askren the other day, and he was saying around people talk as if sponsorship's the way out, and the way the UFC removed sponsorships and taxed the sponsors on people's shorts back in the day. But he was saying towards the end of the sponsorship run, it was getting so toxic where fighters were undercutting each other to get sponsors. So he was saying you'd get a $10,000 patch on your shorts. Towards the end of the sponsorship era, that was going for 1,000 because they'd say, "Oh, 10,000 on my shorts." Robbie'd go, "Oh, I'll do it for 7." Alex will go, "I'll do it for 5," and suddenly the sponsors are getting it cheaper.
Mm.
Well, sponsorships are a clear way to get fighters more pay in the same way they're a clear way to get athletes in general more pay. I don't think, though, that it should be the. I think sponsorships are really good in sports where you don't have a big ticket sale, like athletics, anyone in the Olympics, that sort of thing. Sponsors are really important. I think they should be able to have sponsors for UFC fighters, but just like boxing, there's a large ticket sale. It's a performance, and that's how they make their money by people coming to watch. The solution has to be centered around getting more of that ticket pay to fighters.
I think that is, I agree completely. I think doing something around the gate is probably the easiest and less impactful way infecting the UFC. I think one thing I will bring up around pay though is the way the UFC set out their contracts for fighters. They're making them sign. I say making them, but they're making them sign long fight contracts.
Yeah, multiple
Ho-
fights. I was going to
Jorge
mention that as
Masvidal
well.
signed like a 12-fight contract,
And he
and he
can't
wants more money.
renegotiate.
And he wants more money now, and they're saying you've had one fight on your contract. He never should have signed such a long contract
Yeah.
if he wanted to keep renegotiating. McGregor signs one fight deals, and he goes, "Let's see what you offer me on the next fight.
Yeah.
If it makes sense, I'll do it. If it doesn't, I'm just going to wait." If you have somebody
Okay,
on a 12-fight deal, they're there.
okay. Now, it was clearly a bad move to sign a 12-fight deal, but it comes back again that the UFC holds all the cards. That's why people get shafted like that in these deals. There needs to be movement on a larger scale, and I think there are 2 parts to it. It's you have to get a lot of fighters involved, and they can either go on strike and the UFC and come to and in a sort of more union sense, the UFC will have to talk to the fighters association. That's probably going to go down better in America if you call it a fighters association. It went down okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
but
somebody pull something together like that?
they can dispute over deals, right, and work out what's the best way forwards amongst themselves. Or you need to bring in legislation like the Ali Act.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I think one of the things in the US though isn't the idea of contractors unionized. And bastardizing contract law in the US, which I know nothing about. But I think because they're contractors, they're not allowed to unionize. And I think there's like a legal thing that does that. So I think the UFC still hold all the cards on that as well.
Oh God.
Well,
So I'm curious what your take on Dana's statement that the UFC is not a career, it's an opportunity.
I don't know what that really means. That sounds like a bullshit comment from a guy
Right?
who doesn't want to pay out any more money.
Yeah,
How is it
horrible.
not a career? Like it's it's a fairly short career, right? It might last 15 years, maybe a bit longer.
15 if you look at it.
Yeah, right.
I
Okay,
think
that's
I feel like 5, I think, in the UFC.
Yeah.
but it's still a career.
Yeah, I
And
mean, he's fought so long to legitimize the sport. I think saying things like that are pretty reductive on the idea that they're professional athletes and they've got a career.
Well, you know what? I don't really know what he means exactly by that, but I don't actually think that Dana White should pay fighters based on like sort of a charity thing. A lot of people say fighters should get paid more, and I'm like, okay, well, do you want to pay them? Like it has to come out of someone's pocket. And I think I'm in a kind of weird situation where I'm like, I think it's all on the fighters. I think the fighters are the people who have to do it. They have to make Dana White do this, and I think that's fair. I also don't think it's fair to say, hey, Dana, you've just got to pay them more, just because. No, the fighters have to come together and demand it. It's kind of a weird, it's kind of a do-it-yourself, but also union movement.
But see, I wonder if fans could also have a hand to play, but it would take a lot for the fans to also, sort of boycott the UFC in order to push them.
Fans, you vote with your pound, and you stop buying tickets, you stop buying pay-per-views in the US, you cancel your BT Sports subscription. It's not really going to happen though, because I still want to watch fights.
Exactly.
Not only that, but I think that would only be fair if the fighters requested you do it.
Yeah. No, it's down to the fighters. Absolutely. I totally agree with that statement.
Legit thing. That's a completely legit thing. You're right. Like if the fighters say, "Hey, please don't buy tickets. Please don't pay the UFC anything," I mean that would work. That would work.
Yeah.
But if you just step in and do it without them requesting it, it's just the sort of people talk about like white knighting, right?
Yep.
I think that's the phrase.
Yeah, and it's on such a small scale when it's like that the impact would actually be quite minuscule, because a Conor McGregor fight is still going to demand $10,000 for a cage side seat. He's still going to get eyes going. It's people who are the kind of the casuals who are not going to do things like that because they still just want to turn up and watch their big fight. But it's a movement that probably would have more of an impact, but it's that thing of fighters, fans coming together as one to kind of drive it's to incentivize or disincentivize the UFC from acting in the way they're acting. Until that incentive occurs, nothing is going to change, because why should it?
Well, the other thing is, I think that actually it'd be really good for the sport in general. If this could all happen, there are loads of advantages. Like we said, people will have more stable careers. They'll be able to focus more on fighting. I think we'd get better athletes out of it, and athletes who stay in it for longer. And we'd also see things like, well, if it became the case that you couldn't lock someone into only fighting in one promotion, suddenly we'd see people fighting each other who can't at the moment. Any of the highlights in Bellator can fight people in the UFC that you don't get a chance to view at the moment. That could be really cool. And I think that it would also drive the quality of the sport up, because if you look at it as a really better career opportunity, because there's more money in it, there's more stability, more people will get into the sport, and I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah, because that's still the thing in the US, isn't it? Professional athletes are picking basketball, American football, baseball over MMA because it pays better. You get an actual career that pays you enough that, okay, after a career in American football, you might have some back injuries, but actually you're pretty well compensated. And you've probably got enough to look after your family. There's no incentive to go into the kind of MMA world, because unless you become a star, it
It's
doesn't really
pretty
pay that much.
uncertain. It's pretty uncertain.
Yeah, because we're getting the kind of the end of the NFLers now. We've got kind of Greg Hardy putting his head in after an NFL career to give it a go. It's not his primary choice. It wasn't his first choice. It's a bit of money at the end of his career and something he's probably passionate about. And he can beat people up and not get arrested. That's another story.
Well, I think it would also be interesting to see that fighters could actually express themselves in a more genuine way. Colby Covington wouldn't have to do that crap
Yep.
to get the money he needs. And from all accounts, Colby Covington's actually a really nice guy outside of a cage.
I was just about to say that.
And you would see that, and that would be really cool. But instead, you just get loads of loudmouths. Like everyone's mimicking Conor McGregor, who I do think is genuine, like is quite genuine on camera. That's why it's so effective, and that's why he's made so much money. But other people who are trying to copy him aren't genuine. And I do not mind having someone to do marketing for you and portray yourself in a more obvious way. What I don't like is that you portray something that's not true to what you're doing.
Yep. Like one of my favorite fighters is Poirier. I think he's brilliant. And he's not that type of person. He's not brash. He's been quite kind of well-spoken his whole career. He's never kind of been like controversy central. But actually, he's probably only really started getting paid properly, and properly still not enough, as a meritocracy quite recently. He's had a career, if you look at how many fights he's had, it's taken him so much longer to get to the kind of better pay in the sport. Actually, somebody coming up now and thinks, like Sean O'Malley goes, I can do the McGregor route or I can do the Poirier route. I'd quite like to do the Poirier route, but God, I'd love some money now. Make an Instagram account, start calling out Cody Garbrandt. Next thing you know, you've got a big fight and a lot of money coming your way. That, for me, is the point at which you find your price, and people do have that price, and the UFC are happy to accommodate you paying the price with kind of a bit of integrity and be a bit of a shithead like Covington to make sure you can get paid and have some money.